Today's session is Infusing Civic Inquiry and Purpose Across the Core Curriculum. I am Christina Phillips from Jackson State University, and I will be serving as a moderator and a panelist for today's session. Before we get started, we're just going to go over just how this is going to run and operate today. Also, I want to be sure to thank the Civic Learning and Democracy Engagement Coalition and the University of Virginia's Karsh Institute of Democracy for hosting today's discussion and the forum program. Those rules of engagement of this session are going to go as follows. There is a code of conduct that's being placed in the chat, so you'll see that pop up in the chat, so be sure to reference that for the code of conduct. We're also going to be moving through this discussion. The three panelists will be sharing about 10 minutes each about their programs and the innovative work that they're doing at their institutions. We do welcome you to put your questions in the chat as we move along. As you put your questions in the chat, we ask that you put your name and institution so we can make sure we're referencing the correct people as we bring those questions to the floor. We're also sharing a document in the chat that we will put in at the beginning of each of the panelists' portion of the discussion, and that can help you reference links and have access to the information that we are sharing about that you could follow along throughout the discussion, or you could save it for later to reference if you want to go back and take a look at some of the work at a future point or share with people at your institutions or wherever you work. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As a reminder, again, for those who are joining today's session, this session is Infusing Civic Inquiry and Purpose Across the Core Curriculum. So why are we here and what are we going to talk about? The key goal for this session is to highlight three institutions and curricula that are already making civic learning expected at their institution. An added bonus of our conversation includes some dialogue about the ways in which civic engagement can help increase retention and completion. First, you'll hear from Dr. Heather Lettner-Rust from Longwood University, which is located in Farmville, Virginia. She is the director for the Civic Core Curriculum, which is Longwood University's general education program. Dr. Lettner-Rust also serves as professor of English in the professional writing program of Longwood's English and Modern Languages Department. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Lettner-Rust.
Hi, and thank you, Christina, for the introduction. As she said, the broader information for our programs is in the handout. My goal here is to tell you a story about how we started with our focus on civic learning. And I thought a good framework for understanding this might be explaining our events or our situation in terms of the Wild West. And so I'm going to tell you a little story about a community that had a couple of mayors and the sheriff come to town while the townspeople were working on the civic learning initiative. Way back in the 90s, we're talking last century, last millennium, the mantra at Longwood College then was about citizen leadership. I'm going to track down later in my research how that came about, but that notion was picked up then by the new sheriff in town, which was our president, President Cormier. Back in 95 to 97, she helped us craft a new mission statement. And the mission statement had in it, our purpose was to help develop citizen leaders who were going to contribute to the positive, make positive contributions to the common good. When we articulated that mission, we knew that that was happening in student affairs pretty well, with some civic engagement, with some active service learning, with community volunteerism. But when Chev came to town, and I think of them as the sheriff a little bit, they looked over our program and said, you know, you're not doing that at all in academic affairs on the academic side of the house. So a person who was close to the president back then developed a course called English 400, which was a writing seminar that the students would take as a capstone to our gen ed. And the goal there was, one, to capture some of the students who had not taken writing at Longwood because they were bringing that credit in, to make sure that we had helped students with writing before they exited the university, but also to develop their writing in terms of civic rhetoric, knowing that students need help in developing their writing in any new context that they enter. So this was a perfect opportunity for us to infuse at least our core curriculum back then with a little bit of civic rhetoric. What we found, and in fact, my dissertation was part of that, was that students weren't prepared for the things that we were asking them to do, and that our curriculum wasn't designed to help them succeed when they got to that senior capstone level course. So when the new sheriff came to town, which is another president, his focus was to create a signature core curriculum. And what we did was create a program that we called, and it's a unique title, Civite, a blending of the concept of civic education with life, the Latin word for life, and called it Civite as a logo, as a name, a brand, that would then speak to what students were doing with their general education program. So no longer would we have students talking about, I'm in my gen ed classes, now I'm in my Civite classes. And from the lower levels, the foundational levels up to the capstone course, we are trying to equip students with the skills, knowledge, and processes in order to be a civic leader, or at least a civic participant, and engage in civic learning. So we have a focus on writing, speaking, artistic expression, so that students have a variety of skills that are polished from the freshman year to the senior year. The middle of our program asks students to integrate perspectives from their pillar experiences, which would be their freshman and sophomore level courses in content areas, but to integrate those in order to address community issues. Community meaning either local, state, or national, or even global level. In fact, we've incorporated their modern languages experience into understanding global experiences or global perspectives. So in a nutshell, that's exactly what we've done. And I'd say that we've been working on this since the Wild West years of our core curriculum experience. And we had the new Civite experience started as of 2018. It's relatively new to us, but it did take us a good 4 years to develop that program that was faculty-led, faculty approved, Senate approved, and then finally approved by the board. And last year, we just graduated our first cohort who had gone through that new program. I look forward to any questions that you all have as the three of us finish our presentation. And I hand it off to the next speaker, which I believe Kristina is going to introduce, Sandra Kelly.
Thank you, Dr. Lettner-Rust. That was some very great information. I look forward to the questions and discussions to follow shortly. Next, we will hear from Dr. Sandra Kelly from the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina. At USC, Dr. Kelly serves as Vice Provost, Director of Global Carolina, and Dean of Undergraduate Studies. Turn it over to you, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you, Kristina. So the University of South Carolina is in Columbia, South Carolina. We are, just to do context, we're a large flagship university. We have 27,000 undergraduates, 7,000 graduate students. Columbia is the state capital in South Carolina, and that'll become relevant in a little bit. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what we have in place and then what we put in place just very recently. We call our general education core the Carolina Core. and is, of course, meeting our SACS accreditation. SACS COC is our accrediting body, and it meets the requirements of that. We have 10 learning outcomes within that core, much of which probably are shared by other universities. But we did have 3 learning outcomes really focused on global citizenship and multicultural understanding, and that included both historical and social science perspectives as well as language perspectives. The intent of these particular learning outcomes in our general education core was really expose students to the tools that they need to become truly global citizens. This was required for all of our undergraduate students. In addition, I wanted to mention a little bit about our graduation with leadership distinction. This is something that's pretty special to the University of South Carolina. This is voluntary. Undergraduate students may do it, but students can work to get something on their transcript called graduation with leadership distinction. And it can be in some different areas, including community service, diversity and social advocacy, global learning, professional and civic engagement, and research. And as you can see, these are all types of areas that really have to do with civic engagement and with engagement by students. Just as an example, a student who might do graduation with leadership distinction in community service has to do 300 hours of community service in at least 2 different service areas, has to be documented. In addition, they can do 3 enhancement experiences, such as field trips and public forums, but as well at least 6 credits of related coursework. And then finally, what they have to do is actually present on what they've learned and also present an e-portfolio integrating all of those activities. Not all of our students do that. It's quite demanding, actually, but we're getting close to 10% who choose to really highlight what they do with respect to civic engagement. So kind of moving, that's what we've had in place since about 2013 or so. A number of years ago, well, let me step back. In South Carolina, there's been a law on the books since 1924. That required that all students who received any kind of degree from a public institution must have at least 6 hours worth of teaching on the founding documents. The law was badly written, and it wasn't followed, frankly, by any of the public institutes in the state of South Carolina. It would require 6 hours of teaching in medical school, in pharmacy school, graduate school, those kinds of things. But it's been on the books, and there was really a state legislator push to update the law and make public institutions compliant. Because we are the flagship and we share the state capitol with our state legislators, we're kind of like the gorilla in the room. So we were definitely targeted with respect to being non-compliant. So they started moving on modifying the law. We in the Provost's office brought together a group of our faculty who really do teach about the founding documents and teach about the Constitution. These are faculty who love this material, love teaching it, but they certainly don't like being told by state legislators that they had to teach it. So there was some very interesting conversations, but what happened was we ended up partnering with our state legislators to, first of all, get the law in shape such that we could meet the requirements. So in other words, it couldn't just be a one history course. So we convinced them that we needed a variety of courses that could meet teaching the founding documents. We also very clearly had them add the Emancipation Declaration as well as readings on the African American freedom struggle. So we had that added to the bill and really kind of got the bill such that we could actually address it. So eventually the REACH is called the REACH Act, and I have to read what that stands for. It's basically the act that requires civic education and founding documents education for students. It's restricted to undergraduate students now. It requires a 3-credit course, but the 3-credit course must include founding documents, which is the United States Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, and one or more documents that are foundational to the African American freedom struggle, and finally a minimum of 5 essays from the Federalist Papers. And so we ended up, that got passed. We were actually ahead of the bill. Our faculty senate actually passed the requirement, what we call the founding documents requirement for our undergraduates. And now all undergraduates who entered in, I think, 2021 and beyond have to have that 3-credit course. We also hired a cohort of very passionate scholars in this area who've worked to develop the courses and still meet actually regularly to talk about how they teach it. So the founding documents requirement is part of our curriculum. It includes, courses with titles such as Freedom Papers, Narratives of Race and Nation, American Founding Documents, United States History to 1865, etc. Some of the ones. So it's political science, history, and African American studies that we have a series of basically 9 courses that address the founding documents. This helps us meet the letter of the law, but not have a bottleneck. I was, as Dean of Undergraduate Studies, very worried that we would have to have one course and a whole department that just teaches one course to meet the incoming students' demands. But this way it's spread across different departments and it seems to be working well. I should be honest, we are monitored pretty closely. Our Commission on Higher Education reviews the syllabi yearly to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of the law. But we are able to do it and really expose our students to not only the global citizenship that we had emphasized before, but also a real deep knowledge of our founding documents within the American society. So thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to your questions as well. And I will pass it back to Kristina.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. That was very intriguing to hear about your integration with what your state requires and how you've implemented through your coursework. So I look forward to the discussion that will follow shortly as well. Please remember to post your questions in the chat. Now is a good time to start putting those questions in the chat, because when I finish my portion, we will move into a more interactive part where we will have Q&A. So go ahead and plug your questions in as they come up. And also remember to put your name and your institution with the question. And so again, I'm Christina Phillips, and I am serving as Executive Director of QEP and General Education at Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. Like Dr. Kelly, I also am at an institution that follows SAC-COC accreditation. And so that QEP stands for a Quality Enhancement Plan, and that is a requirement of our decennial accreditation review process that's facilitated by SAC-COC. I began at Jackson State this summer, and my position was designed to continue the work that took place from summer 2020 to the present in the form of a position that's dedicated to help support the revisions that were made to our general education curriculum called The Pathway. And so you'll see on the handout, there's a link to the pathway, so feel free to open that or reference it later. And that really outlines all of the requirements and how our pathways are designed. So prior to me joining Jackson State, as I mentioned, beginning in 2020, our leadership team charged by our amazing provost, Alyssa Mosley, and our exceptionally talented associate provost, Dr. Brandy Newkirk-Turner. They took a really thoughtful and intentional approach to committee work, and they used data to support some equity gaps that our students were experiencing in our old general education curriculum. So as a result of that work, the pathway was adopted for fall 2022, and all students coming into our university from this point forward have more choices in how they fulfill their general education requirements, and this includes civic engagement through some guided pathways. And we called it the pathway as a play on some words that mean a lot to the Jackson State University community. So that's why you see the pathway. So the pathway was designed to really support 4 specific areas. First, we wanted to provide expanded course options for general education requirements. And these requirements are mandated by our state governing board as well. And so we wanted to expand what was previously kind of prescribed for the institution, where students were having to take particular courses to fulfill those requirements. So that was expanded, and now students can build their general education experience from a menu of courses that have been vetted out by a general education curriculum. So we thought that this, and again, we have some data and research to support this, but we really wanted to connect those general education courses to specific outcomes of critical reasoning, communication, and analytic reasoning. All of our gen ed courses are now required to use a common syllabus and a common textbook to, again, help students have a consistent experience across the general education curriculum and to help them build community among each other, which we know that helps support their overall success. Second, in this gen ed redesign, we incorporated math pathways. So the new math pathways options allow students to really have a good fit between the math course that they're taking to fulfill general education with their selected degree program. So previously we had one math course, college algebra, that was the catch-all math course for gen ed requirements. So now students can take introductory statistics, they can take college algebra, our college algebra co-requisite course, or quantitative reasoning to satisfy that math requirement. Next, we have the gen ed guided pathways that really allow students to explore career paths and options from diverse academic areas. So if you're kind of on the fence, maybe you're thinking about changing your major, or you haven't been exposed to different areas prior to coming to college, these guided pathways help students navigate the experience of becoming exposed to different areas. These classes are thematic, and again, they promote that career exploration early on so students can have that experience early in their academic journey. So like the 2 institutions mentioned previously, we also have a team of faculty and staff that support the students and provide resources as they declare their pathway and as they're navigating the pathway experience. And so they're providing resources in terms of different events that are happening on campus, ways to be involved in areas related to their pathway, how they can look for like internships or service learning requirements. They can have the faculty member or designated staff member to help them make selections along the pathway. As I mentioned, the pathways are themed. So the students have to take 3 courses, which are 9 credit hours of this themed coursework. And these are all contemporary issues where students, again, have a variety of options to choose from to fulfill their pathway requirement. So for us, our pathway themes are discourse, data information literacy, justice, environment and sustainability, health, financial literacy, and then we have a global engagement. And so to keep equity in mind, we also have an option where our transfer students can create an alternative pathway that helps them really take what they bring to us and make their own pathway, so that way they're not having to repeat classes or take additional coursework if they're transfer students. Last but certainly not least, the fourth component of the pathway is that students will be making connections through their career experience, their personal interests, and civic involvement with their first year experience course. So here it's called University Success, and a new Gen Ed capstone course, which is called Civic Engagement. So for us, that's University 200. So we have University 100 on the front end and University 200 on the back end of the Gen Ed to help students really start and connect the pieces throughout the experience. This Civic Engagement course will be offered for the first time in this spring 2023. So we're really excited about the work that really so many diverse partners in our community have helped us to establish. And it was really important for us, and I do want to mention this, as an HBCU, a part of our mission is to help really cultivate global leaders who help to advance societal problems. And so this civic engagement being integrated within our pathways really is true to our mission as an HBCU. And so again, with that being said, we did take special attention to make sure that the co-curricular is connected to the academics. And so the students are coming in and they have the faculty, they have the staff to help them have the lens of thinking about, well, how do I position myself to really make sure that what I'm choosing to do, that I know how I'm going to impact inside society, or how I want to impact society through, the path that I've chosen. If you click on that link, the pairings of our classes, the overview, and the placement of our courses can be found on that link. Right when you open it up, we have a graphic that goes along with it that we're really excited about. The students are really excited about getting into the pathway because we've been sharing this graphic over and over to help them really connect with, what they're actually getting ready to embark on. And then I also want to note that we've been partnering with Complete College America, which is where, I made the connection to participate in this session, and they have really helped us hugely in our math pathway design and how we're designing our courses to support equity in our math pathways. And then some sessions that we've attended and gotten some guidance on has really helped us connect to these, national agenda, reform agendas of ensuring civic purpose and engagement through curriculum design, and really using evidence-based strategies that support both engagement and persistence. So we're very thankful for these connections and the opportunity to have dialogues just like we're having today. So that wraps up what I have to say about the pathway at Jackson State. So now that we've all had the opportunity to hear about these innovative initiatives at Longwood and at the University of South Carolina, let's start the discussion. Now I do want to ask all of our panelists, really, we can chime in. What's your process that you have built in to make sure that the skills that you have embedded in the initiative stay relevant with both the students and those industry partners? Like, how are you making sure that those skills are up to date with what people are saying that students need to be successful?
I think I can jump in a little bit. most of our gen ed core is as I said, I think from 2013, so it's a little old. And one of the things that we're really trying to drive home about the general education core is learning how to learn and learning how to work in teams, with the recognition that sometimes you don't need skill-based courses. They come out, the skill will help them, but 5 years from now, they won't be using that particular software program or something like that. It's going to evolve. So really driving home that there's that the general education requirement is really, actually, I sometimes argue it's the most important part of the curriculum, because it's the one that's going to help our students become citizens in the world and adapt to a changing workplace. I've read, that we can't even imagine the jobs that will be there 10 years from now. So that's how we have to train the students. And that definitely is what you hear from industry as well. They want the students to be flexible and adaptable and capable of learning how to do new things.
Thank you. Dr. Lettner-Rust, what's your take on that? How are you making sure those skills remain relevant with students and industry partners?
I'd say that we found the same thing that Sandra was talking about. When we developed the new core curriculum, Civic, we looked at what industry leaders were saying were the important skills. And it wasn't the software or the particulars, but it was about collaborative learning. It was about writing and speaking, and those kinds of creative processes to allow students to analyze a scenario. So we embedded those into the outcomes throughout the program, where students are working on collaboration from the freshman year into the junior, senior, and then it's definitely at the heart of our capstone, which ends in a day where the students are collaborating about their civic issues that they've been studying and commenting on those. And the writing and the speaking and the artistic expression has also been embedded within the program. But one of the ways that we sold the core curriculum as well, and this speaks, I guess, to another issue, is that we agreed to take on the assessment that the university needed to assess according to SCHEV and SACS COC. And so then we're always updating and getting feedback about how students are performing in these very processes that Sandra has mentioned, and so have I, that we can then report out to faculty and respond to them what students are actually doing.
Great, thank you for sharing. And at Jackson State, I mentioned we have committee work. And so we have diverse partners represented at the table when we're having these discussions about what should be included, what should not be included. And that was purposely designed in a way so that when revisions are needed, people can bring that to the table and we can make decisions appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am going to remove the spotlight at this point from our panelists, so that way we can see everyone in the discussion, and then we'll move to the questions that we have in the chat. So removing the spotlight. Okay, we have a question from Brian King from Muskingum University. And Brian asks, what challenges and/or obstacles did you encounter in adding to or altering the gen ed? And how did you navigate those challenges? And he's also provided context that his challenge a decade or so ago was faculty believing civic engagement was just community service and belonged in student life. That has largely gone away, but I wonder if there will be a resistance to increased gen ed or a fear that faculty will be asked to do more. So I can start because I came in to Jackson State at a time where, a lot of the decisions were already made, and I was brought in to help implement the changes that were decided upon through that committee work. And so some of my onboarding included meeting with every single academic chair and every single department to be sure as we launched in fall 22 that the faculty understood, how these changes were going to be incorporated and how they would be integrated into the degree maps, which, they own, their departments own their degree maps. And so in terms of obstacles and or resistance, there wasn't a whole lot because it was a collaborative effort to make the changes. There were representatives from each department, but there were a lot of questions related to, this means we have to do more. And because we're using a common syllabus for across the gen ed curriculum, we really wanted to drive the point of doing the work now will help make this process easier in the future because, wouldn't it be better to collaborate on these types of initiatives rather than having to write your syllabus on your own or trying to figure out what textbook you're going to use on your own, and really that laying the framework for these collaborative types of opportunities will maybe a little bit heavier of a lift now, but will ease that load in the future. So that's how we approached it at Jackson State. Sandra, Heather, do you have anything to add to that question?
We didn't have any problem at all. No, I'm just kidding. I will say this, there are always pockets of resistance, and they seem to be the loudest voices. But overall, we have faculty who have enjoyed developing new courses with this focus. But I think, Kristina, as you have said quite well, it takes meeting with faculty one-on-one or department leaders one-on-one. And I'm a new director to this, though I've been involved in the process since we started it. And as I took over, I met as well with all the chairs, and I meet with anyone who has these questions. But I will say that one of the central difficulties we had with faculty is about meaning, about defining terms. And so I would hear, what do we mean about citizen leadership? I never heard that defined. And as a newer faculty, when I heard that, I wasn't sure where the definition was or was located. It wasn't repeated to me. And so it's become really important to have a faculty created or at least grassroots effort to understand the concepts or the terms that you are using, whether it's citizen leadership or active citizen or citizen participant, or even civic engagement, as Sachs is asking us to, or allowing us to define it for ourselves. For us, civic engagement is not necessarily community service, though that's part of it. For us, it's also part of the processes of thinking about your civic engagement and the kind of skills that you bring to the table. So having those definitions clear and repeatable becomes really important. Sandra?
Yeah, those are, Kristina and Heather, you both had great answers. So I don't have much to add, except I think what I wanted to add was the importance of having faculty champions. When you're trying to do something. There are, of course, faculty who really understand deeply what civic engagement is, who understand service learning and can be the champions as you're moving forward in change. There's sometimes, turf battles, particularly with the general education core, got to include my course, but really trying to talk through what the value of the general education component is with undergraduate education. And sometimes that is better coming from other faculty members who haven't crossed the line into administration. It's really, really important.
Great, thank you. And thank you again, Brian, for that wonderful question. Our next question is from Carol Schneider, and she asks, how are students responding to the civic-related courses and pathways? Is there a process for sharing student responses with faculty? And I'm going to start with Heather because you had some really good points about how the students were having discussions among each other about their classes and how they were excited at your institutions about the Civic model.
So I take this question in two ways. How are students responding to civic related courses? And then is there a process for sharing student responses with faculty? I'll have to say that I don't know that we have a good pathway or avenue for students sharing responses. I have heard from the SGA president who's talked to the Board of Visitors about a positive response. We have students who are responding to faculty, and we are gathering their reflections in different levels of Civic to understand what they are understanding, and those are positive. They are excited about the courses that we have. But in responding to Carol, it makes me realize that we need to have a better avenue for finding out what the student responses are with faculty beyond student evaluations or things like that. What we do know is that students are picking up the language that we have asked them to understand in Civic. So that concept of that word Civic, they are picking up. And so instead of us getting questions about what it is that they're doing in their gen ed courses and what is goal 1 or 2 or 3, which is what we had before, a menu option, a distributive model, we have names for each of those levels. And so we have measured the student response in terms of them picking up the language, which, you know, happens in your own classes, right? When they start adapting the vocabulary that you have asked them to learn, you understand that they are now understanding your process as well. So our bottom level courses are called Foundations, and we have Citizen 110, or we have Pillars, which are the freshman, sophomore level classes. And they are saying, this is my pillar. And then these are my perspective courses. And then this is my Citizen 410 class that does X, Y, and Z. I think perhaps the best measure of that was that they came up with silly names for what they were doing in their pillars. And there was a student in a ceramics class that's an arts class, artistic or aesthetic expression, and they call it their pillar filler. So when students start to sort of make fun or have fun with the names that you've given it, I think that they are understanding what they're doing and they have incorporated it into their language.
Thank you. That's very helpful information. So at my institution, again, this is newly adopted for students. So our incoming students are engaging with this for the very first time as a collective this year. They are having conversations with their academic advisors. So we have gotten some feedback that since this is new for them and new requirements, that they were just kind of unsure of what it meant. And so we're working now to get some videos created and some information out on social media and some coordinated email efforts to make sure that students truly understand the requirements and so that they know how to navigate and how to ask the right questions. We did create these little table toppers that we're putting out at the like student union and places where students gather and have table, and they have like questions on the back that helps them think about some questions to ask their advisors, since we heard that there was still confusion or that there is confusion about the new initiative. So we wanted to make sure that we had some marketing strategies to help the students better process and understand. We also had some students involved in the committee work as well. SGA representatives, I think Heather mentioned they had some SGA feedback from her institution. And so we had some student leaders to also contribute to the thought process behind our pathways, and we will continue to engage them on the committee work as well, because they know the pulse of the students better than we do, and so we thought it was important to invite them to the conversations. Sandra, do you have anything to add about student response?
Generally, the founding documents course is pretty new, so we're just starting to see kind of reactions to it and things. I was thinking that one of the things that we've moved forward with, so I mentioned the graduation with leadership distinction in the e-portfolio. Students do that in their senior year, and it requires that they reflect and integrate across all of their different activities, both classroom as well as outside the classroom, and really put it together. We have found, and we've been doing this for quite a while, students find this really, really hard, first of all, and second of all, they often recognize the importance of their general education, in particular, kind of the global understanding part later. So one of the things that we're moving forward on is really trying to engage our faculty and engage our students to get the students to do reflection earlier, to really reflect on what they're getting from their courses and how does it integrate. So, you know, an incoming first-time freshman, you know, they might take a speech class and they might just do a service Saturday, nothing, you know, huge, but being able to go, okay, how did your speech class, for example, help you with your service learning? Those kinds of things and putting it together. So we are just in the process of doing that and then sharing that information with faculty. We do have some amazing quotes from students in their e-portfolio that we do share, talking about the importance of the classes that they took and how it's helped them outside the classroom. And of course, we use that with their permission.
Thank you. Our next question is from Tracy Mylander from Lorain County Community College. And she asks, can you share more about the common syllabus and book for all gen ed courses? And yes, I can happily share about that. So we, in some of that data that was collected again prior to my onboarding at Jackson State, what was really elevated as a theme was that the student experience was not consistent in different general education courses. And so this initiative was taken to really help provide that consistency across gen ed. Because when you think about it, students, especially coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of changes happening between, do I want to take a class online? Do I want to take it in person? Or if you have a disruption, whether it's personal or related to the pandemic or it's something else and you needed to switch classes, then, you know, if you're 2 weeks in one mode and go into another class, then you have to like relearn what's going on in that class, where it essentially should be more consistent to help that transition for the student. And so that was some of the evidence that we used to move towards having those common documents. Again, this was implemented for the first time this semester, and I won't say there was resistance per se, but it's taken some time to get that adopted across all of our gen ed courses. Some of our courses did really well with that, and some are still working through what that exactly means for them to have common syllabus. Something that we also did, I mentioned we collaborated with Complete College America for our math pathway redesign, but they really helped to provide us with some resources as well for equity-based syllabi and how to make your syllabi more student-centered. And that's really going to give us the opportunity to further enhance those common syllabus requirements that we have for our gen ed courses. The same equity lens were used for the textbooks because, you know, how fair is it if one section of Intro to Psychology uses a $20 book and another section uses a $100 book, and they're learning two completely different things. And of course, we want our faculty to still have some flexibility in how they deliver their courses and how they design certain pieces of their courses. But generally, everything should connect back to those gen ed student learning outcomes that we've identified, and this is going to help start the process for making sure that those courses are working towards the same learning outcomes, and that was the best way that we decided to implement that. Does anybody else, any of the other panelists have some input on common syllabi or common textbooks?
Just envy Christina. We need to go there.
Definitely a work in progress, but we, again, like I mentioned before, we know the work now is going to help benefit the students later. Okay, we also have a question about process. How did you tag courses for civic learning outcomes? And then the second question is, Christina, you gave examples of math courses. Do they all have civic learning outcomes? And so I'll answer that question about the math courses first. So that partnership that we had with Complete College America, they spent an intense 2 days with us to really look through the syllabus for math pathway courses and how to give them a civic lens, how to give them an equity lens. And so we did some really great work in framing questions, problems, and I guess math examples that are relevant to like current issues. One example that our math faculty was already doing was related to like social media and like how to analyze, I guess, factual information and data related to social media posts. And so that was a good example that our math faculty already had. And they talked about how the students are really excited about, you know, connecting that topic because it was extremely relevant to them. And they really coached us through like how to make other examples for math problems relevant to what the students were doing. And we saw that most evident in our quantitative reasoning class, but those strategies, we're trying to replicate that for our statistics and college algebra. Again, when you're assigning students problems, trying to make it relevant to things that they're seeing either in their other courses or in their day-to-day. And so the second part of that question, really the first part, is how do you tag courses for civic learning outcomes? Heather or Sandra, do you want to take a stab at that?
I can say oh, go ahead, Sandra.
I just can say really quickly, we have the registrar do that. It's done in our enterprise system. So I don't know all the technicalities, but we do have it such that students can search by learning outcome and be able to find courses that meet that.
Yeah, and all of our courses in the Civic, in Civite have an attribute, and so students can search by the attribute in the program for those courses. But at the same time, if your question is how are we tagging civic learning outcomes, we have broken down what we think it takes to be a civic participant and made those outcomes part of the entire gen ed program. And I'm going to end right there because I know we just have about 2 minutes left, I think.
Yes, we are running short on time. And so thank you, Heather. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for this wonderful discussion. It's been truly a pleasure to talk about how we've infused civic learning throughout the core curriculum at each of our institutions. Once again, I am going to drop that handout in case you missed it before. Feel free to download that, follow the links. Each of our position titles on that handout links to our bio on our web pages at our institutions. And so if you have questions after this session, feel free to reach out to us beyond this meeting. We appreciate your time and attention and your questions to today's sessions. Any closing thoughts or closing comments from Heather, from Sandra?
I have to say, I think you did a wonderful job shepherding us through this experience. Yes, thank you, Kristina.
Thanks, Kristina. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you. It's truly been an honor to have this discussion and to collaborate with you both, Heather and Sandra, and also to get to know the questions that each of our attendees are having from their institutions. Your questions were very insightful, and it's got me to thinking of some ways that we can incorporate some better strategies to help continue infusing civic learning across our curricula. I hope you enjoy the rest of the forum. There's a lot of great sessions continuing today and tomorrow. So again, feel free to reach out to us, and thank you for joining us today.